from NBC Sports Philly. Dave, I'm seeing a little gray in that beard, not equivalent to McMullen and McDonald,
He's
but
got a ways to go before he catches up to us, man. Ways to go. It's good to see you, though, Dave.
Yeah, it's good
I'm
to see
used
you
to
guys.
seeing you every day.
Yeah.
It's that little lull we get, and the combine. So it's going to prick up pretty soon. I guess we'll start with the coordinator searches because it's interesting, the dichotomy. Eagles, at least publicly, talking to a lot of guys on the defensive side. I think we all assume Brian Johnson's going to be the offensive coordinator, but in theory, they have to talk to somebody to satisfy the Rooney rules, but nothing has developed yet. What do you make of the search, and what are the tea leaves? What do you think the reasons are behind it?
Yeah, I mean, starting with the offensive coordinator, I think we all just understand the situation there, that it's going to be Brian Johnson, and deservingly so. I think a lot of people look at the Jalen Hurts connection, and that's certainly important, but his work merits consideration too. And Jalen Hurts is a part of that, but whatever connection they had, he's getting the most out of them. So, and you look back at his stops at Florida and Mississippi State, and even like early days at Utah, like he's done a lot of really good things. So, I think he's going to get this chance eventually, whether it was here or somewhere else. So, in a way, the Eagles are lucky the timing worked out the way it did. And, good thing the Colts didn't have another coach back out and have to wait another month to hire Shane Steichen, because they probably would have lost Brian Johnson in the process. So that works out well. And then on defense, I still think Denard Wilson's a really strong candidate. I know he's an internal candidate, and I know fans are like worried that it's just going to be Jonathan Gannon's defense. But like, I think there will be some staples if Denard gets the job, but you look at his background and it's really varied. He was under Gannon the last 2 years, but Greg Williams' influence, Todd Bowles' influence. So I'm sure he has some other ideas philosophically about defense. And then you have to remember what Nick Sirianni said in his end of the season presser. Like, he dictates defense in a way by the guy he hires and some overall thoughts about philosophically what his defense wants, what he wants his defense to be. So to me, that's
real quick to jump in there, Dave, as a follow-up, because when Gannon got hired, I thought we were going to see like a bunch of Mike Zimmer stuff, we didn't see it at all. And then I said, well, I guess he took a liking to Matt Eberflus, so we'll see a lot of Eberflus stuff. Not at all.
We saw some of it last year in 21. We saw some Eberflus stuff,
a little bit, but it's mainly the Fangios and Brandon. He's very close to Brandon Staley's version of the Big Fangio defense. But my larger question is, does Nick have more of an imprint on this philosophy that we all think? Because, Jonathan was running, at least from what Nick says, what he wanted.
Yeah, it's possible. I'm curious to see what that defense in Arizona looks like this coming season, especially with Nick Rawless out there with him. I think, you're right. We know when they hired Gannon, I did a crash course on the Zimmer
A-gap pressure. Yeah.
So we never saw
a
single double A-gap blitz, there was none of that. And even Zimmer over time really changed his defense too.
Yeah.
A lot of
more of an overload. Blitz.
But
either way,
and they're not there.
I thought we were going to see that third down pressure that Eagles fans would have loved, by the way, but we didn't see it. We saw a bunch of, light boxes, quarters coverage. And by the way, they were very successful. I think I'm bananas. I mean, number 2 defense, 70 sacks, all the turnovers. They played a bad second half of the Super Bowl, but they were in the Super Bowl, Dave. I mean, that's pretty good overall over a large sample size.
Yeah, I think a lot of the frustration about Gannon's defense boiled down to mindset, and it's it's not always the most fun thing to watch. And
that I agree with. Yeah.
Sometimes you have to ask yourself what's more important here, the success, but you also have to question, is it built to I don't know if any defense is built to beat Patrick Mahomes, but like, is it built to beat one of those elite quarterbacks who has the ability to nickel and dime you down the field with efficiency like that? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. Well, we won't get to see it now. Probably that iteration of the defense we'll never see again, right? Like just by the nature of changing players and changing coaches. But I think a lot of it probably does stem from Nick. Getting back to your original question, like I think Gannon had a ton of it. Like obviously it's his defense. I think Nick would steer it in certain ways at times, but it's funny. Like we talked in 2021, Nick's directive during the season, at least the public one, was we need to be more aggressive defensively, which kind of contradicts what he said after this season, where, everything is about explosive plays and we want to prevent the explosive plays, which is a really good strategy. At times it can be frustrating to watch if they're not getting pressure and if they're not getting turnovers. And we've seen that happen too. I was really fascinated they interviewed Vance Joseph because that really seems to not be what Nick wants. And maybe just gathering information from Vance about some of his philosophies, but that never seemed to make sense to me. Like what we've seen the Eagles be and what we think they want to be defensively. I mean, Vance is not like that at all.
Yeah. Like you said, it's a very good system until it's not, a.k.a. second half of the Super Bowl when Mahomes surgically went down the field and kept sticking it in the end zone against them. So that's why, as Jonathan Gannon leaves town, there are a whole bunch of people that aren't worried about him leaving. But here's my defensive coordinator question for both of you two guys. Forget Vance Joseph, forget Sean Desai, forget Denard Wilson. Why isn't Vic Fangio the defense coordinator of the Philadelphia Eagles? They had the creator. They had him in-house. They had him with him out of the Super Bowl prepping for this game. And then all of a sudden he's in DC of the Miami Dolphins. What has Miami got on defense that the Eagles don't have?
Timing.
Yeah, timing, exactly. And they made him the high, and he was hired before he was a consultant, which was so interesting because you never see that. But Miami agreed to terms with him before the Eagles agreed to terms with him. And it was just a timing thing. And he's the highest paid defensive coordinator in football. But I think if the timing worked out, as Dave pointed, say Jonathan got the Houston job and everybody knew it, I think maybe Vic would be the defensive coordinator here.
Yeah, and when Jonathan Gannon didn't get that Houston job, everyone thought he was coming back, and him included. Like, that's the problem, and that's why I said, like, the timing, at least for the Eagles offensively, works out where, they don't end up losing Steichen and Brian Johnson. It didn't work out defensively if Fangio would have been a legitimate target, and based on everything we know, that would have made a ton of sense for both of them. And like, there was this thought that, well, the ink hasn't dried. He hasn't signed those papers yet with Miami. But I mean, you just can't do that if you're Vic.
Well, you can if you're Josh McDaniels, but not if you're professional.
Well, I mean, you get in a room with Jim Irsay for 4 hours and tell me you might not change your mind. So I look, I was one of those people, he hasn't signed the papers yet, but you can't do that. And he agreed to terms with them and he's there now. So the timing, I think it really just came down to timing there. And it's not a guarantee he would have gotten the job. The Eagles value their interview process. They're not just going to go in with preconceived notions. Jeffrey Lurie won't let them handle it that way.
Well, then I hate to keep coming back to this. And John keeps talking. We don't know who they have or haven't talked to. Okay, everything's leaking on the defensive side, but somehow the Eagles are completely seal-proof on the offensive side. How come they haven't interviewed anybody else other than Brian Johnson?
I don't know if that's accurate, though. We don't know publicly who they've interviewed, right? So,
all right, so I'll try again. Then why do we know 6 or 7 guys who have interviewed or they talked to or shown interest in for defensive coordinator, but they're these shadow figures that we don't know anything about on the offensive side? How have they been able to keep offensive interviews so under wraps, but yet not been able to keep anything defensively under wraps?
Well, I don't know the answer to that necessarily, like from a factual standpoint. But let me ask you this, Jody. If you were interviewing for a job that you knew was going to John, would you tell everyone about it?
It's a good point.
So Denard Wilson is not a given. Not the same level of given that Johnson. Okay.
Yeah, because all the leaks are not coming from the Eagles side. I mean, the Eagles, remember, Dave, that, everybody confirms now in the NFL head coaching interviews. If you're looking for a head, you'll see on Twitter, we finished an interview with so-and-so. We've completed an interview. The Eagles wouldn't even do that when they were going through the process to hire Nick Sirianni. I remember arguing with the PR staff. I mean, can you at least confirm the interviews? Everybody else does it. No, we don't want to do that. I don't know why, but
they just want to send their one release with, here are the 37 staff changes we've had.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Now with Vance Joseph, I don't know if you saw, but Mike Cleese, who covers the Broncos, is pretty plugged in with Broncos. Vance was saying like, I thought he had a good chance at the Eagles job and the Denver job. And as makes sense, he wants to portray like I made the decision to go back to Denver. I don't necessarily buy that. I don't think I'm with you. I think the Eagles are, from the defensive side, I think it's Denard versus Sean Desai. Simply because they want to use the same scheme. Those are the two guys that at least have experience in the same scheme, but they want to look at sort of innovative college coaches because most of the innovation comes from the college level. They want to look at adding some pressure, maybe so you talk to Vance Johnson. That's what I think is going on. But and ultimately it comes down to, look, if somebody blows you away like Nick did in a head coaching interview, hire him. Jesse Minter blows you away, hire him. The kid from Georgia blows you away, hire him. If not, then you can come back and say, look at all the people we interviewed, and Denard Wilson is the best candidate. That's kind of my frame on that. But I want to get your thoughts on it.
Yeah, I think the Eagles really value the process, maybe more than any other team in the league when it comes to interviewing for these high-profile jobs. So I'm including the coordinators and especially head coach. I mean, their head coaching interviews are legendary around the league. I know there was this story of Brandon Staley when he got the Chargers job, was so thrilled because he was scheduled to meet with the Eagles, and he's like, I don't know if I have this in me right now to go through that marathon. So that interview from Mike, or the report from Mike, said that Vance interviewed on Zoom for like 4.5 hours and had another session scheduled the following day. That sounds like, oh man, they're about to hire this guy, until you really understand their process and know that that's not unusual. Like they dive deep into these interviews, and it is not a walk in the park, and they're trying to get information. It's not about just trying to figure out if they want to hire you. They're learning concepts, and they're getting, I think there is a ton of value in, learning about pressure from Vance Joseph and blitz scheme from Vance Joseph, because he does it maybe not better than everyone, but certainly more than everyone. Just about everyone. So I think that's what they're using it for. And I always thought it, like, a guy like Vance Joseph didn't make sense to me. I would have been really fascinated if they hired him to see what the heck this defense would have looked like, because if Vance Joseph blitzed as much as he did in Arizona with this defensive line, he'd be out of his mind. But I was kind of fascinated to see what it would look like.
Yeah.
Dave, let me move over back onto the field with the players. Don't know if you saw it. I think it was Matt Castle on the NFL Network came out with the very first quarterback rankings heading to 2023. Somebody's got to go first, and Matt Castle raised his hand and said, all right, I'll do it. And, of course, he has Patrick Mahomes number 1. He has Jalen Hurts number 2. What happens if Howie Roseman meets with Jalen Hurts' agent next week and the agent says, well, Matt Castle is fairly respected foreign player. We want to be the second highest paid quarterback in the National Football League. And Howie goes, whoa. Jalen's only done it for 1 year. And the agent says, So you pay in arrears here in the National Football League? You pay for what you used to do? Our guy was number 2. Aaron Rodgers was number 12. And oh, by the way, he makes $50 million. So we start above and beyond $50 million for us. Is there any chance that conversation happens and becomes a major fly in the ointment to the Eagles offseason?
No, I mean, I don't think, with all respect to Matt Castle, I don't know if that's a huge bargaining
That's not
chip.
a negotiating point.
Yeah, I think the bigger bargaining chip is, look what our guy just did in his second season as a starter. He was an MVP candidate, took us to the Super Bowl, might have outplayed the best quarterback in the world on the biggest stage of the game. Now, with that said, I don't know if I'd have him second right now. If I'm playing that game, I'd probably have him behind Joe Burrow. But either way, he's a top 3, top 4, he's a top quarterback in the league. And if you're Nicole Lynn, his agent, you do start really high. That's how negotiations work. I always laugh when I hear, so and so asked for X amount of money. Well, yeah,
why wouldn't
that's
you?
how it works. Like, you ask
Opening
for a
salvo,
lot, and
right.
then you whittle it down to what you eventually get. I mean, that's just how that's how any negotiation works if you're doing it the right way. So yeah, they're going to ask for a ton, and then it's going to be a process, and they're going to come up with a number that's still going to be really, really high. And I think, in terms of average per year, that's a big deal. That's how we label players, like they're the X highest paid so-and-so in the league. But the guaranteed money is really what matters. And the commitment they show to Jalen Hurts long-term is what really matters. So it lost in all the contract stuff is going to be the important details. And that sometimes matters even more.
Yeah, and I agree. And by the way, the Eagles' history is it's not going to be a problem. They understand the cost of doing business at that particular position, and they're going to be in. I don't think it's going to. They understand better than most. It's only going up, and Joe Burrow's coming down the pike, and Justin Herbert's coming down the pike. So, if anything, they want to get it done quickly to save as much money as possible. But I want to talk about free agency as a whole. The other positions are more interesting to me because I know what's going to happen with Jalen. They got a lot of decisions to make, especially on the defensive side of the football, Dave. And we were talking about some of these valuations coming out, whether it's you like Pro Football Focus, Spot Rack, they value and they're usually pretty good. Players like Javon Hargrave, everybody had a career year on defense, Dave. Everybody. James Bradbury's getting paid. Chauncey's getting paid. TJ's getting paid. They can probably only keep one of the linebackers, one of the safeties. James is probably going to walk. I don't know what you do with defensive tackle. Do you want to pay Javon Hargrave $20 million a year? Do you have to at age 30? Is this defense going to look way different next year, or do you think they can sort of at least keep a core group together?
Well, they'll keep part of the core together, but it's going to look different because there's so many free agents. I mean, both safeties, both linebackers, both starting defensive tackles are free agents. I mean, that's a ton. That's the entire middle of your defense. If we're looking at priorities, to me, CJ is a guy I want him back on the Eagles. I don't think they traded for him to let him walk. He played really well in his first year at safety. There's still going to be some growing pains. I think we kind of gloss over that. Like it wasn't always great, he was learning a position, but the fact that he played as well as he did in his first year at that spot is really encouraging. He's a young player. I think you feel good about paying him whatever it takes to keep him. After that, my next biggest priority is Javon Hargrave until the price gets to be too high, which it very well could. So I think there are like tiers to this, and those would be my top two guys. Love to keep TJ. Really would. I don't know if you want to spend the amount of money on TJ that you might get on the open market, but it's also tricky because you're trying to figure out what the rest of the league is doing too. And sometimes these markets play out differently than you expect. I remember years ago, the Eagles were like in the market for a receiver, And then the receiver market just went bananas and they were left out. And then they quickly funneled their money elsewhere. And then another player becomes like, then one of the receivers is like, I forget who it was like Rashad Perriman or someone, it seems silly now, but like then he ended up being much cheaper later on, but they had already put their money somewhere else. And that's the problem, is like they're spending a lot of time and energy trying to figure out which way the league is going to go. But ultimately, like, you don't know what's going to happen, and you just have to be kind of prepared to roll with it. I'm sure they have some plans in place, but you never know exactly how things are going to play out.
When you had your end of season media session, even though, what was it you called Howie Roseman, John? Annoyed or frustrated?
He looked depressed to me.
Depressed. That's what we were going through, the stages of depression, and
yeah.
Howie was stages of
stages of grief.
Grief. Yes.
Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. I think he was still,
and Howie was still stuck in depression.
Yeah.
But he did say, and I think you got to accept it at face value, that come draft time, the Eagles are going to take the best available player. That they want to be in a position to just draft the most talented guy rather than draft for need and fill a hole. And last year he proved that. He went out and took positional players other than Jordan Davis. And, oh, by the way, they had enough guys there. He was just a situational substitution guy. So he took a situational substitution guy, an unquestioned backup center, and a pretty much unquestioned backup linebacker with his first 3 picks. That's not drafting for need. That's drafting for overall depth of your team. So he's coming off a season when he absolutely did it. They do that again this year, or are they going to have too many holes that he can't do it, that he's going to have to look specifically for need because they're going to have so many free agents walk away?
No, I mean, and Howie's in a position where he says he doesn't feel like he's has this like lifetime GM status that he can do whatever he wants for the long-term future. But the fact of the matter is he does have that backing from the organization, whereas some GMs are fighting for their jobs every year. And they feel that need to draft for need and plug holes and make the roster better. Overall, for the health of your franchise, it's better to not feel that pressure to do that. And we saw that. I mean, last year was a textbook example.
Yep.
Those guys just didn't have the opportunities in their rookie years. The Eagles, Pro Football Focus, looked all this up. Credit to them, because I wouldn't have done it. It took too long. But they got the fewest snaps, offensive and defensive snaps out of their rookie class than any other team in the league last year. And that's not a reflection on the draft class as players. That's a reflection on how they went about the process. So I don't think it'll change this year. I think, I don't think they just draft the best player available. It's best player available with weighted positional rankings, if that makes sense. Like, they obviously weight certain positions more than others. So the best player available is a running back. Doesn't mean they're drafting a running back, right? It means that they kind of weigh it and they weigh the player. Like, if the player is special, then they'll make an exception.
Yeah, they're not taking a quarterback at number 10. He might be the best player, but they're not taking him.
Yeah. But like, I think that there could be like a tiebreaker scenario of need. Like, man, these two players are deadlocked. We think the positions are similar in weighted value. Well, we need this position. I think that could be maybe a tiebreaker, but I don't think it's going to be a driving force of the draft.
All right. Last one from me, Dave, at D Zangaro NBCS. Follow Dave on Twitter, NBCsports.com/Philadelphia. You can read him there. Does a tremendous job covering this football team. You mentioned TJ a little bit. He's the most interesting free agent to me defensively. You laid out why. Really good player. Love to keep him, but he might be too expensive. The most interesting player to me, and probably only me, because everybody else has kind of moved on from Miles Sanders, and I'm there. 90% chance he's not going to be back. But that position is so devalued, Dave. It is so devalued, and teams are getting smarter. It seems like there are less and less teams each year willing to pay a running back. So you look at the landscape and you see Josh Jacobs. and you see Tony Pollard. Who was the other one we mentioned, Jody? There's
Saquon
another
Barkley.
Saquon Barkley, depending on what the Giants do. Even guys like Alexander Madison, I know he's a free agent that could be cheaper. There's so many running backs out there. If Miles doesn't find that 2-year deal, that 3-year deal, and it might not be there for him, could he be back with the Eagles?
Yeah, you kind of think about like Derek Barnett last year. It's a little different circumstance, but like the market doesn't develop. He's comfortable here. He feels like he can still contribute and get that big deal elsewhere next year, possibly. I look at it from Miles' perspective, but it's like, man, if he can't get a deal after the year he just had, like, is it ever going to get better for Miles Sanders than to play every game, have 1,200 yards and 11 touchdowns? It's probably not. And that's not a shot at him. It's just like, that's a really good season. It's hard to imagine him playing better. But, yeah, if he doesn't get that deal, you're looking at, okay, this offense is still really good. Offensive line's still really good. You have Jalen Hurts, who just by being on the football field opens up a lot for me as a player. I mean, if you're talking about should I stay here and take a cheap deal or go elsewhere and take a cheap deal, stay here wins in a landslide, you would think.
All right, last one for me, and it's to give you guys credit. When I say you, I mean NBC Sports Philly. You guys did a great job leading up to the Super Bowl and then the game itself and the post-game stuff thereafter. You and Ruben Frank hanging together as much as you did. Did you guys share a car often?
At the Super Bowl?
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't rent one. So Rube rented one, and we were at the same hotel, so we did quite a bit, yeah.
Gotcha. So when you get in a car, does he just completely take over the listening to music? Because he is such a musical wonk. Do you have no say in the matter? Do you just sit back, relax, and go, all right, well, I got Ruben's going to run the music. I got no choice here.
Yeah, yeah. And it was his car. Like, if I drive him somewhere, I will control the music. Like, if it's my car,
how's that go?
Yeah,
it's fine. Like, he knows my taste enough that like
is he a snob about your taste, though, Dave? Is he a snob about your musical taste?
No, I don't let him be.
Good for you. All right.
Yeah.
TZ talking some smack.
No, I mean, like, music is so subjective. But like in Arizona, we were listening to, he had a satellite radio in the rental car. So we were listening to, he knows I've been a big fan of I don't know what you call it, like outlaw country music recently.
Sure.
And it felt like it fit out there, right? Like listening to, Tyler Childers and, all that kind of stuff.
Is that new? When I go outlaw country, I'm going green grass and high tides. I'm going back to the 90s. I don't know anybody who does outlaw country in the 2000s.
Oh, there's a bunch. It's a thriving genre right now.
Right.
But it was we listened to a lot of that. It was very fitting, like driving through the desert out to the Eagles hotel.
Nice.
There'll never be another Molly Hatchet. Dave Zangaro, thank you very much. We always appreciate it whenever you hop on. Are you Indianapolis bound? You going out? Rube going out? Both going out?
I'm going out. I think I leave Monday morning. Yeah,
cool.
Monday morning, Indianapolis. Howie talks Tuesday, right? Howie and Nick?
Wednesday.
Right.
Howie and Nick Wednesday. Yeah. Wednesday. We'll hear from Jonathan Gannon on Tuesday.
Oh, that should be fun.
Yeah.
It was always
ask him about the Super Bowl, Dave.
Jonathan, that Super Bowl, what happened?
If looks could kill. Zangaro, we always appreciate it whenever you come on. Thank you very much. We'll be tapping in plenty during the off season. Have a good time out in Indy.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Dave.
Dave Zangaro, NBC Sports Philly, here with us on Birds 365. All right, quickie timeout. Come back. We not only have to put a bow on the show and a bow on the week, but it's for a 2-week period because the Mac and Mac guys are going to be off next week. We'll come back and